You're most welcome to the day 2 of Feed 2026. We would like to acknowledge the unwavering support of our partners and sponsors who have made this platform possible. We express our gratitude to our platinum sponsors ABB and Schneider Electric, gold sponsor Grundfos India, silver sponsors Tabreed and Thermax Limited, session sponsor Carrier, and our knowledge partners, the Energy Efficiency Movement, Kazam, outreach and network partners, GBCI, IEEMA, ISHRE, Netra, Rama, and Rata. As we start our day 2, we commence with the session on the backbone of e-mobility, residential charging as backbone of India's EV revolution. This session has been co-curated with our knowledge partner Kazam. And I would now like to welcome our moderator for the session, Mr. Sumed Agarwal, Director AEEE. And our speakers, Mr. Akshay Shekhar, co-founder and CEO Kazam. Mr. Alekhya Datta, Director, Electricity and Renewables, TERI. Mr. Jaideep Saraswat, Associate Director, Vasudha Foundation, India. Mr. Pradeep Agarwal, General Manager, EV Cell, BSES Rajdhani Power Limited. Now, before we proceed with our session, I would like to invite Dr. Saddam, Principal Research Associate, AEEE, for a short presentation on residential EV charging in India, a systems perspective, followed by a joint publication launch by Kazam and AEEE team. Dr. Saddam, please.
Thank you, Vivek. Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be speaking about residential EV charging in India and why it is the best understood not as a standalone infrastructure issue, but as a system, one that connects households, distribution companies, urban farm, technology, and policy. When we talk about EV charging, public charging often dominates the conversation. But globally, and increasingly in India, the backbone of EV adoption is residential charging. This presentation looks at the backbone through a systems lens. Let me begin with why residential charging deserves attention. International experience shows that 60 to 80% of EV charging happens at home. India is no different, especially for two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and increasingly private four-wheelers. Residential charging directly affects the cost of EV ownership, user convenience and confidence, and load profile of local electricity networks. If residential charging fails to scale smoothly, EV adoption itself goes down. India's residential context is unique. Unlike developed countries, we have high level of multi-level dwelling, informal parking arrangements, mixed ownership and tenancy, and varied quality of electrical infrastructure. So solutions that work in detached homes in Europe or US cannot be directly transplanted into Indian cities. So we come to the question that what constitutes an EV-ready home? For an home to become an EV-ready home, there are minimum sanction load, individual legal metering, dedicated charging circuit, continuous low-resistance earthing, appropriate copper wiring, spatially safe installation, and future readiness as a minimum requirement. This slide captures residential EV charging as an ecosystem, not as a single asset. It includes the consumer and the vehicle, housing societies and RWAs, DISCOMs, charger manufacturers and installers, and regulators and local government. Each of these actors has different incentives, responsibilities, and constraints. And misalignment between them is where most of the bottlenecks arise. From a technical perspective, residential charging directly interfaces with the low voltage distribution network. Unmanaged charging can lead to local transformer overloading, voltage drops, and accelerated asset degradation. However, the same charging load, if managed intelligently, can actually improve grid utilization and enable higher EV penetration at a lower cost. Housing societies are critical but are often overlooked node. They control parking access, electrical upgrades, and internal approvals. RWAs hesitate due to cost concerns, safety fears, and lack of technical guidance. Targeted capacity building and standard operating procedures can unlock large-scale adoption in this segment. Charging is not just a technical issue, it is also a behavioral one. Most residential charging is overnight, low power, convenience driven, and not speed driven. Understanding how long, at what power users charge is critical for designing the tariffs, smart charging strategies, and infrastructure standards. India has made important progress on policy. We have provisions under the Electricity Act, central EV charging guidelines, and several state EV policies. But residential charging still faces gaps around metering and submetering, tariff clarity, and responsibilities within group housing. Policy needs to move from permission-based to facilitation-based approaches. From an economic standpoint, residential charging is the cheapest form of EV charging, but costs are unevenly distributed. Designing fair cost-sharing mechanism is essential to avoid resistance and delays. Residential charging is where smart charging makes the most sense. With the right signals, such as time of day tariffs or automated controls, charging can shift away from peak demand, reduce grid stress, and lower system-wide costs. When viewed in isolation, the residential EV charging seems to be messy and complex. But when viewed as a system, it becomes manageable. Align incentives, standardized processes, and use of data and smart controls with design policy around real-world behavior, the system approach becomes essential if EV adoption is to scale sustainably. Residential charging is the foundation of EV adoption in India. India's housing and grid realities demand context-specific solution. Coordination, not just infrastructure, is the main challenge. Smart charging can turn a problem into an opportunity. Getting residential charging right means getting EV transition right. Thank you. Now I would like to invite the panel and the team behind the publication, Ms. Vani Vivek from Kazam, Ms. Vidyotma from AEEE, and Mr. Anmol from AEEE.
Uh, I would request the panelists to please step forward for the photograph, please.
विवेक आप एक मिनट रुकिएगा विवेक we'll do one more photo please because we want the background also. आ रहा है ना? Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Kazam team and the panelists. And now we begin with our session on residential charging as the backbone of India's EV revolution. Our moderator, Mr. Sumedh Agarwal, Director AEEE, would be moderating this session. So floor is yours, Sumedh.
Thank you so much. Good morning, and thank you so much. I think, yeah. Can you hear me well? Okay, great. So first of all, thanks a lot to panel members who have joined me today. Not every day we get such a high caliber panel comprising of DISCOM, comprising of infra solution provider, and also think tanks who are working deeply and directly with policymakers. So thank you once again to all 4 of you who are here today. And one interesting thing which I have also noticed is that this panel comes with decades of lived expertise in this particular area and also are seeing the transition and driving it. So I am pretty hopeful that today's discussion is going to be very, very useful for the audience. I was thinking that the way I would like to structure this panel discussion is we will have an introductory remarks by each one of you about what exactly you are doing, certain examples that you can share so that it becomes more relatable to the audience. So I think starting with Akshay, if you can please share.
So Kazam is, I think, one of the first movers in the entire energy charging space for electric mobility. We started somewhere in 2020. Today we have more than 200,000 charging stations on the ground, and I think 80–90% of them are home chargers. So what do I mean by this is every vehicle in the 3-wheeler category that is being sold gets a charge point along with it, which is installed in your house. And this is essential because if you really want to see adoption of electric vehicles, which the 3-wheeler category has seen, so you will see that it has grown from 0 or 1–2% to now 30% plus new vehicle sales being on EV. And this happened because the consumer who has to charge his vehicle on a day-to-day basis had the facility to charge it on a day-to-day basis inside the house, inside his own premises where he had access to electricity. And I think this is what we do. We are now around 350 people in the company and close to 10,000 PIN codes that we service. And we get you a charge point within 24 hours of you actually buying a vehicle today in the market. That's about us.
Excellent. So Akshay, just a follow-up, how many chargers have you installed so far?
2 lakh, that's
Oh, wow,
200,000.
wonderful,
Yeah.
excellent. Okay, Alekhya, please.
No, thanks, Sumit sir, for giving us opportunity. And of course, in TEDI, of course, I look after the renewables and of course the power sector. In electric mobility, I think we developed a couple of roadmaps. We closely worked with West Bengal Transport Corporation. We created a charging roadmap for entire city of Calcutta and the new Kolkata township. Currently, we are also working with Bhutan. I think the things that you have left, sir, I think recently we are working with the Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport. We are also creating the roadmap for Bhutan, and it's basically with a focus on private sector investment in the charging ecosystem. So, sir, in addition, of course, we, few years back, we did couple of, studies for Delhi also with all 3 DISCOMs in Delhi. So we, that time we feel like residential charging, of course, that time it was like not in a discussion at that point of time, but slowly, if you see recently the report of CEA, I was going through the November 2025, the consumption data from EV charging, PCS, non-PCS, those kind of. So kind of a 20% kind of a demand of the consumption that are happening. That is essentially because of non-PCS, that means of course the home charging or whatever, because not from the public charging infrastructure. So it is slowly taking up. Maybe if we see the current consumption, maybe it could be higher than 20% what at present. But yes, I think a lot of opportunities are there, but again, on the other hand, a lot of regulatory hurdles. Even I personally also have an EV. I stayed in high-rise societies, but again, there are a lot of problems to get a plug point even. So that those are the concerns I think we can discuss during course of time.
Thanks. I mean, having a person who possesses EV and also part of panel makes things more easier for us. Jaideep, if you can please.
Hello. Hope I am audible.
Thank you, Sumit. It's a pleasure to be here. Uh, just giving a brief about Vasudha Foundation. We are a premier policy think tank in India that works on clean energy and climate change space. In terms of electric mobility, we have been working on motley of interventions ranging from zero emission trucks, doing pilots around zero emission trucks, vehicle integrated photovoltaics. We are actually developing first of its kind battery refurbishment guidelines for a state in India. We are doing pilots on battery refurbishment that includes SOH upgradation as well for a first life battery infrastructure. Apart from that, we also work very closely with state governments in order to provide them support in developing forward-looking policies. And MP is one example where the EV policy was supported by us, and it is actually the first of its kind policy that is based on AI-based agentic principles. We actually created the entire MP state environment and used agents to ensure that the interventions are properly selected based on the requirement of the state. The other aspect is we, as an organization, always take a soup to nut kind of an approach, ensuring that not just the development of the policy, but also the effective implementation of that policy becomes a critical aspect of our work. And coming to the topic around residential charging, there are multiple interventions in the policy itself that we have already taken care of. First, when we were working on this idea, we realized that there is a huge gap between the demand and supply. So CPOs are looking for something called utilization percentage to be higher. At the same time, consumers were looking at how charging infrastructure can be located near their vicinity. What we did was we created a portal called EV Tarang portal, MP EV Tarang portal, and any individual who is a resident of Madhya Pradesh can go to that portal, submit a request for setting up a charging station near their location. As a result, that aggregated demand is communicated to the CPOs. CPOs see this is the utilization in that particular location, and they go ahead with the deployment. Simple intervention, but actually can work wonders going forward. The other aspect is, from the RWA's perspective, we had ensured that from the policy it moves to operational guidelines, and there is a clear directive that is provided to the RWAs that you need to provide NOC to each and every individual within 7 days to deploy a charging station. If they are not able to do that, it is deemed approved, else provide a written submission. What is the reason that you are not able to provide that support? And the consumer again can go to EV Tarang portal to submit a complaint against the RWA in case they are not getting the kind of support that they are looking at. The last part, and I'll stop with that, when we are developing this policy, we also surveyed multiple consumers, close to 1,500 plus, and what we realized was that 70% of consumers were saying that if there is no residential charging in place, if you can provide me charging at my workplace, that also is something that will nudge me to go ahead and purchase an electric vehicle. So what we did was, MP will come out with first of its kind charge at workplace policy that ensures that each and every individual gets that kind of confidence that if there is an issue at the residential side, there is always a proposition for them to charge their vehicle at the workplace, and this will also give a significant boost to the entire charging ecosystem per se.
Thank you, Sumit sir. Thank you, AEEE, for providing the opportunity. Good morning to all. I represent BSES Rajdhani Power Limited. We as a DISCOM serving South and West Delhi area, we have seen a journey from 2017. There are a lot of transformation, and this journey is very full of learning. Prior to 2017, there was e-rickshaw, and they are like synonym to theft only. And since 2017-18, the EV space has emerged as an organized space, and more of charging being treated as a commercial operations, commercial aspects. 2018-19, we did one study, understand whole aspects of charging requirement in our area, the consumer, what consumer required. Then the policy shapes up, policy comes out in 2020. There was practically less than 1% EV adoption in Delhi, which now rose to 16% of EV adoption. There was quite of skepticism that how these load being managed, how these load being served. All these, we went through all these phases. We very well efficiently served the load. Right now there are 3,800 e-buses running in Delhi. We are efficiently serving the load, all the requirements. The EV adoption rose from less than 1% to 16% at present. More than 4 lakh vehicles are being registered in Delhi area. Catering, serving entire consumers. At present, the load is 150 megawatt plus. As per the mandate of the policy, we roll out the private charging program. Under the private charging program, we offer the chargers as per their requirement, and we did the empanelment of the vendors, and there was a single window portal through which the chargers can be availed online, and the consumer has to pay net of the subsidy amount, and without bothering how to avail subsidy, where they get subsidy, they don't bother about it. The vendor will get the subsidy directly from the government. So that was, and then further going through this load management require, we did demand flex activity, demand response from the major EV stations where some kind of load reduction being provided to us. Of course, it's a very sunrise sector. There are a lot of growth opportunity in this area, but the coincidence of peak that has to be managed for only very few hours in a year. Yeah, thank you.
I'm glad to hear that, and glad to know that all the good work you all are doing in your space. I will just try to, see the context of our discussion today is residential charging is the backbone of EV revolution. So my questions I would prefer to calibrate in a manner that are basically kind of wicked questions, vexing problems that are relatable to common man. So I will just try to ask those questions and see what kind of learnings the audience can get. So beginning with Akshay. Akshay, you have been on the front lines of charging, of installing thousands of chargers. So I have two facets. So first is, beyond the technical specs, what is the most common human or social reason a residential project hits a dead end?
I think I just want to reiterate here that residential charging is not high-rise buildings charging, okay? India is not defined by the top 5 cities that we live in. It is also the many villages that are there and comprise out of it. And if you look at how EV penetration is happening, it is not happening in the cities. It is happening in places like Siliguri, Cooch Behar, Lucknow, Bareilly, Agra, right? These are the top 5 cities that are really adopting EV. And if you really want to solve problems, I think it is not really going to happen by us creating, just nomenclatures for high-rise buildings or workplaces. It is also how do we ensure that the penetration in this level happens, and then we are able to get real infrastructure for EV adoption in place. So that is, I think, the first thing that I really wanted to talk about and define over here. The second thing that I wanted to kind of speak about is, if you look at energy as a parameter, right? So let's take oil. Oil is sold by 3 or 4 major companies in India, which market it, which is the government PSUs and some few private players. But 70% of their sale actually happens in the commercial space, which is obviously trucks, buses, and players like the auto rickshaws, etc. If you see, if we all adopt to EV, it's all going to translate to, again, electricity altogether. So we have to look at two-pronged approach. How do I cater to this commercial fleet, and how do I get to his house? So that when he starts adopting to EV, more and more shift actually happens from oil dependency to electricity, so that we kind of move in this direction. And that's why I don't want to define residential as just the high-rise, but also the individual of an auto rickshaw person who is living in an individual house and he has access to charging at the place where he stops. So I define that as home charging or residential charging for him, and not just that. So that I just want to leave that thought with. The second thing that we have kind of seen is how do you actually not just look at regulatory opportunities that are there in the market. I think a lot of us have tried single window. We have created portals where people can get charging station. I think Kazam is one of the biggest beneficiary of this, because we started doing a lot of installations in Delhi. Out of the 10,000 charge points that were meant for Delhi city, we installed, I think, 8,500 of it in the early days in 2021. But we realize that the scale does not come there. Scale really comes when every vehicle gets accessibility to charging. Because in a journey of a person, 80% of the time you will charge your vehicle at home. Think of your cell phone. You go home and you charge your phone, right, over the night. And very few times would you go and charge in an airport or elsewhere. And I think that's the journey for an EV driver. So if you solve that, you kind of ensure that he even thinks of buying a vehicle.
No, great points, Akshay. I think I will just push you a bit. So two things, what you mentioned, and rightly so, that tier 2 cities are basically the ones which are driving the EV revolution, and those are the ones where we also have to focus. And second is fuel switching, which you mentioned again. But so my question to you is that what residential business model is actually making money today? Let us try to also understand, because there could be hype-filled models that simply doesn't work in Indian context. I mean, it's a very different geography altogether. So if you can throw some light there.
I'll give you an example of just my company, right? We sell, as I said, every month I sell anywhere around 15,000 charge points. And we are almost profitable. Okay, and what I do is I sell home charging. These charge points are sold for a margin, and they are bundled along with the vehicle. This gives you the first thing, that is access to electricity. Once you create the layer of access and you make money on access, you have then digitized this. This charge point is the first digital instrument in the electricity domain, in majority, right? And once you create digitization, you have data points, and you can then start working on other things like how Pradeep sir mentioned about demand flexibility, about creating virtual power plants. Rather, we are also doing something called as energy trading. So because you want to consume electricity at night or in the peak time, we can ensure that solar is being used and sold to these consumers to charge. And I think we are working together on building that as well under the Ministry of Power. So these are all opportunities that are possible, and I think economies can be created around it. Yes, but if you start putting up just in residential high-rise societies as an independent business operations, you will not make money just in that.
Good point, and that gives me a segue to ask question to Pradeep ji. Pradeep ji, I mean, BS is one of the globally benchmark utilities, I should say, and you have done a lot of work. But my question is a bit trickier one. What I'm trying to understand is, see, like you also mentioned that EV is a sunrise sector. We also realize for a distribution company, it is a one-time opportunity. How you harness it, it is up to the strategy of the business. But when we talk about EV charging infrastructure, shouldn't it be a distribution asset? I mean, why shouldn't be a utility thinking it, because you have substations, you have land, you can create charging infrastructure. So maybe that is something which I would like to you to answer. And I mean, generally till now we had been, you have been always a power seller. But with this transition, wouldn't it be that you will become a mobility enabler? I mean, I'm just trying to put that question to you, if you can kindly respond.
Thank you, sir. Very pertinent question with respect to DISCOMs doing in EV charging space. Sir, to set up a EV charging infra, we need three things: land, electricity, and the charger capex. Land, definitely we will identify through municipal agencies, through private bodies. Electricity, definitely we as a distribution company has a control on that. Till meter we are supplying. After that there is a cost incurred by the CPU and the battery swapping operators. We as a company are into the setting up of charging stations, but as a regulated entity, we are not directly allowed to invest in the charger. That is, after the meter, we are not allowed to invest in that. In case we want to do that, we have to carve out a subsidiary, and then that subsidiary has to take care of these charging operations. Otherwise, it will create some kind of less competitive scenario for the new startups or the charge point operators to being competitive in this market. And there are other aspects as well. As a prominent player, if I deploy some particular kind of technology, it will be going to the masses and then become the trend. It will kind of kill the innovation aspects as well. So it's better being a very nascent sector in sunrise sector. The multiple technologies should coexist, should survive. The small players, the medium players, and the large players all will coexist and do business in a non-monopolistic way. So that is our thought, and we are setting up the charging station in a collaboration mode. We are providing land and electricity. The charger capex has to be done by the partner vendor, and there has to be a rev share model, which we are opting out. Sir, next question, you said that as a retail from the electricity seller, why can't we become electricity mobility enabler? Yeah. Sir, definitely we, as a distribution company, are a mobility enabler. We provide separate connections into the premise, which is addition to their existing electricity connection. The tariff notified by the regulator is already at a very concessional rate, 4 rupees 50 paisa per unit. There are few teething troubles like in RWAs and housing societies, and that has to be taken care by the government by putting up right of charge in the consumer rules notifications, and which empowers all the individuals in our area to avail a separate connections and have the charging facility near to their premises. I can say that what we are observing that from the 5-6 years of the journey, initially there are more thrust on the public charging space. But now the private adoption is taking shape. It is now at a parity when most of the experts says that private charging constitutes 70% of the entire charging segment. Now we are seeing that this is actually happening. The private charging outpaced the public charging requirement, because public charging is morely for intermittent charging, which is required in the city area, but more in the highways, fast charging sort of public charging. And intermittent charging is mostly being utilized by the fleet operators, and they have a restricted capacity. Let's say at present 70,000 to 80,000 cabs are plying on the road. And if government converts entire fleet, these public fleet operators to EV by creating some kind of mandate, that maybe more or less will increase the utilization in this space and will be beneficial for this public charging infra as well. Yeah, thank you.
That is a very, very valid point you mentioned, is the public charging vis-a-vis the private charging and the intermittency angle. And I mean, this brings me to another piece which you also mentioned, is there are the teething troubles that we have with RWA. So I have questions for Jaideep ji and Alekhya ji, and they are more because you have been in the trenches of EV, seeing the things, and also because you in some way or other own electric vehicles. So these are kind of a battle scar questions I should ask you. Maybe I will first take with Alekhya ji. So I mean, you own an EV. So what is the one key misconception policymakers hold about residential charging that is contradicted by on-ground data or implementation experience?
No, I think Sumesh sir, I think just going through your, the reports, insights. So I think one thing we have to understand, I also agree with Akshay what he has mentioned about, I think the majority of the charging, particularly for the individual owned EVs, irrespective of two-wheelers, three-wheelers or four-wheelers, are bound to be at home, at residential side. Even if you talk about the four-wheelers, because there are larger capacity of batteries and the models are coming, if you have one night charging, it can run for 3 days, irrespective you are traveling from Noida to Gurgaon or whatever, that kind of a range. So essentially, the problem is, of course, what we can do is, I think there are possibility of because I stayed in high-rise, there is some different issues, different barriers. But what Akshay was talking about, the majority of the two-wheeler and the three-wheeler adoption are happening at the tier 2, tier 3, even in the villages also, two-wheelers front, or maybe three-wheelers. So there, I think we have very, good opportunity, because, there are a lot of schemes, like we are talking about solar rooftop, because the PM Surya Ghar scheme. And of course, we are analyzing couple of cities or some of the states. The lot of exports are happening in the solar arts. So essentially, that means there is low demand at the residential level as well. So maybe storing electricity, use that in the night hours, both for consumption as well as for EV charging. There is also possibility of a convergence, because a lot of, I think under the PM Awas Yojana, there are a lot of, houses that are being built. Of course, there is a mandate to have solar, there is a mandate to have e-cooking. Maybe we can have a mandate for EV charging also in those, because there are a lot of ready-made market, CPO can be attracted, because a lot of demand that is there. High-rise buildings, sir, to be very honest with you, there are a lot of difficulties. I think one ambiguity is EV charging tariff and residential tariff. I think that create the major misconception. I think I'm not sure whether BRPL, Pradeep sir will like it or not. The first thing we have to do, we have to move away with EV tariff, at least for the residential segments, because anyways it is cost subsidized. It depends state to state, but if we move away with EV tariff, but rather going for time of use type of things. So I think if that mechanism we adopt, then of course we can have, at least the regulatory hurdles, and it will automatically create the incentive to the consumer. So, and of course the comfortability of the distribution utility to provide ease of connections and those things. So I think convergence is very much required. National Building Code, I don't know about what is the mandate or what is the provision there. Of course, building bylaws, there is MOP has, put it some, or Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, they have included something, but I don't know practical implementation of that, because building code implementation is a challenge, if you also know, sir, because there is a revision in building code that is happening at BIS, but a lot of challenges, understand the building code, implementation on ground is a real challenge. So I think convergence of different schemes, opportunity exists, but the convergence of scheme, right implementation is a possibility to accelerate this residential charging.
Alekhya, you made a very fascinating point about tariff. I mean, time of use, seasonal tariff is something which really may provide an impetus. But taking cue from what you said about households, I mean, condominiums, high-rise buildings, and that is a question to our colleague from Vasudha Foundation, Jaideep. So, I mean, who pays for the common infrastructure? That is the biggest challenge. Suppose a person, whether he is in two-tier city or living in high-rise, he wants an EV, but he's living in a rental accommodation. Then the owner says, no, I will not be investing because tomorrow someone else might come. So who pays? At RWAs also, this is a big challenge to convince so many people. So any fair share model you might suggest that might help us to have that kind of that can prove as a catalyst on this, in this area.
Hello. Yeah. Sumit, I wish there was a simpler answer to this, right? If you look at this point of time, there is no one-size-fits-all solution approach that we can actually take. Each RWA itself is very different, and the approach has to be very much in alignment with what the requirement of that RWA is. And I'll provide you multiple models that are floating in the market. There are certain RWAs that I have seen where the individual meter panel itself is in the ground level, and as a result, what happens is that you can actually draw connections to individual meters itself and provide charging infrastructure deployment at that particular location, maybe at the parking space of the owner itself. Then there are other models where from the common metering panel, you actually have a sub-meter drawn, and this is the manner this is done is basically the RWAs are assigning a dedicated parking space for EV charging, and anyone who owns that EV can actually start parking their vehicle there and get their vehicle charged. And the infrastructure costing is not significant because it is pay-per-use kind of a model that can actually be looked at. The third aspect that comes to mind is also a public-private partnership kind of an approach, where initially you see that not many people in an RWA will be actually going ahead with an EV. So what you can do is you can ask the CPOs to deploy a charging infrastructure within the RWA, and the infrastructure that is being deployed is not a DC infrastructure that basically leads to significant cost for the owner, but rather a type 2 kind of a infrastructure, 7 kilowatt, 11 kilowatt, so that they are able to charge their vehicles in a cost efficient manner. But again, as I said, that it depends on a case-to-case basis. It requires that understanding, and support has to be provided from the OEM side in order to ensure and facilitate that kind of charging infrastructure deployment for the owner. And I'll take one bit of yours, and I know you asked Alekhya about the misconception, right? And one thing that I do feel, and when you were asking this question, I thought the biggest misconception, and it is not just for the policymakers itself, it is actually across multiple stakeholders in the value chain. It's that the EVs are considered as grid liability rather than a grid asset. So what we need to understand is that we have always been developing regulations, policies for individual DER solutions, right? Solar, we came up with net metering, virtual net metering, gross metering. Now, it's very important for us to understand that when we are talking about electric vehicles, we are looking at an average of 70 kilowatt hour. If we talk about model-based average in India, 70 kilowatt hour of battery that is sitting with the vehicle, with the consumer for 90% of the time. And if we then nudge the consumers to go ahead with deploying solar and storage solutions, which is 5 kilowatt hour, that doesn't make any sense. It's like wasting the entire infrastructure that you have at hand. And this also brings to a very important point that OEMs themselves are not very confident in India in bringing that vehicle to home, vehicle to grid kind of a solution. You have 48 models in India that the consumers can choose from. Not even one model is providing vehicle to home, vehicle to grid opportunity for people. This showcases that even though the same OEM is providing that kind of support across multiple countries, but they are not confident to provide that in India. And that brings to the point that there has to be certain nudge that comes from the government in order to move into that direction, have a holistic regulation that takes into account all the DERs per se, and then move forward.
What you said is absolutely right. And that prompts me to ask one question to Akshay and then follow-up question to Pradeep ji. And this is more related to the harsh realities. The kind of houses we live in, or in the tier 2, when I was in DISCOM, we were said that 24/7, reliable and quality power. But reliability and quality is always compromised. We have voltage swings, we have many issues. When you started at Kazam, what was one harsh reality that when you went on the ground, you realized, no, this is something which I didn't thought about. You went back to the drawing board and then came out with a solution.
Yeah, I think that was one of the key things that I really wanted to talk also about is, as I said, I install 10,000 charging stations every month. And I install at very, very small houses, also informally connected electricity connections. But, because of the EV now coming in place, these houses are now finally getting earthing in their house. One of the key things that I do is to bring infrastructure into their, safe infrastructure into their house. And as I said, it's not just 10,000 charging stations, but 10,000 earthings done every month. And we do it. So it is like, you also asked Pradeep ji a good question that, why don't you set up infrastructure? You are already distributing electricity. It would be like saying that, why don't you put ACs in my house? Because you're also giving me electricity. It is very similar to that. We need to start understanding that home or residential charging is not DC fast charging. It is, AC slow charging because you have 7-8 hours at night to use that. And it is a consumer durable product where you can buy it, you can install it, just the way you install an AC and you call somebody who puts the piping and copper wires and then ensures that your AC is cooling properly. Similarly, you do earthing, you put up the charging stations and ensure that there is no neutral earth leakage, there is no voltage fluctuations. The nearest substation is also having the right earthing and no neutral leakage. So the problems that we face currently are surges, and we have created a mechanism where our charge point can handle those sudden surges that happen up to 20 kV. And these are, I'm talking of for individual houses, right? And places like Guwahati and Jodhpur, where rocky soils are there or very wet areas are there, it fluctuates even more. So these are some of the ground challenges that we learned on grounds up. Second problem is, how do I make India's economy ready for doing this installation from a skilling point of view? Because not everybody understands how to do quality earthing, how to maintain that quality, how do I have the skill set to do the installation of charging stations and connectivity of it into the grid, etc. So this is the second major problem that we had, which we had to scale very fast. Okay. The third challenge I would say is the vehicle OEMs never stopped. They kept selling more and more vehicles, and if if we were waiting for regulators to do this, I don't think they would be in a position to sell so many vehicles. Because when you are selling a vehicle, you are promising that you will be able to use this vehicle on a day-to-day basis. Again, it is like buying an AC and telling that you cannot install it, you cannot use it, and because you don't have copper wiring inside it. So that is the problem statement that we really solved on ground, which ensures that a person who's charging his vehicle, he himself does not get shock, the vehicle does not, when he touches the vehicle, it does not get shock, and the vehicle does not burn because there is now surges, etc.
Right. No, that's good to hear that surges and the protection is something which was key mandate for you. And I think due to paucity of time, but I would still go for that brief question to Pradeep ji. It's very, very practical. I am a part of an RWA association, and we had a corpus. And I'm talking about Delhi, not talking about tier 2 cities. There are condominiums, there are high-rise buildings. We had a basement parking. There was a proposal that for each parking slot, we should have a EV charger. But then, wouldn't for a DISCOM, it becomes a challenge because they have to augment their DT transformers assets. I'm talking from the assets perspective. And not knowing what would be the load, because not everyone might be going for an EV. So I just wanted to take your views on that suppose this kind of a proposal comes to you, how you estimate that load?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Again, very valid question. Whenever such proposal comes, we in fact inform or sit with RWA persons and said how many premises are there, how many users are there at present in your building or in your RWA. And then let's say if a RWA of 1,000 premises, 1,000 flats are there, and if they plan for let's say 2030 and require at least 3 kilowatt minimum or 7 kilowatt on an average load, then it converts to a 7 megawatt of load. At present, they are having only a 1 megawatt or 2 megawatt of supply. That means all the RWAs or CGHS are already at HT supply. So the problem is twofold. One, now there are only 4 or 5 EV users in their society. How they avail the connection at LT level? Because they are availing at present the supply from DISCOM at HT. So to facilitate that, we enable the minus metering concept. Whenever we have a supply, there is no LT supply nearby, what we do is we tag one supply, one bus bar, and do a minus metering. When we say minus metering, that means the consumption through that particular line is metered at that particular tariff. That is a minus metering. Now coming to the question of future ready buildings. So we educate RWAs to go for some kind of provision in their societies so that they apply for load, go for a gradual load increment rather than going full throttle. Go for another 1 megawatt of increase that will cost you additional setup cost. One more thing the Sumesh sir is asking is how the cost burden will impact on DISCOM. To clarify, for LT customer, the network augmentation cost is entirely being borne by the discoms and being socialized in the ARR. But for a ST consumer like RWA, CGHS, there is a 50-50% sharing basis. So effectively, the 50% cost is being socialized in ARR, 50% cost is being borne by RWA, and they will get that augmentation done. So this is how we suggest them. For initial 4 or 5 consumer, don't plan big, because it will take time, augmentation will take time. We also need to do a lot of augmentations. We provide the connection at LT metering, at LT level through minus metering. For future ready, you go for gradual increment depending on the uptake in your society or RW.
That's a very, very useful input. I wanted to open the floor to have 2-3 questions, yeah, and I wanted you to speak before I open it. But if there are 2-3 questions, if someone can raise their hands and people can pass on the mic. But before that, Alekhya, maybe very brief, but yeah, I would love to hear
only
your...
one line. What I think Akshay has talked about the skilling. I think, sir, because you know, like this, the PM Surya Ghar, the solar technician training that we are doing with MNRE and particularly in Odisha and in Assam. So where we also, got a kind of a support from Mercedes under their CSR, because Mercedes, as a part of the CSR, they want to create the EV charging ecosystem in India before they comes up with the models, or but again, it's more on the CSR side of it. So the same solar technicians and the EV charging technicians, we have customized the solar technician course, which has been developed by MNRE, and we also created our own the EV charging operator course, and we got an NCVT approval for the particular training. So that means the same technician can work for solar rooftop, can also work for EV charging technicians. So we have also tie up with some of the CPOs, including GOPP and all. So I think sir, the skilling, because you have also mentioned in the report, Akshay has also mentioned, it is very, very, very much required and pertinent, and because particularly on the safety side of it, the earthing, the surge protection, I think that is something kind of the gray area that we have. And if we can create the technicians, even at the tier 2, tier 3, in the village level, those things, I think that the ecosystem will develop very fast. I think that, an integration of EV and RE policy is a must. I think one certain time when you're developing the EV policy 2.0 for Delhi, I was working with that time, I think, the Commissioner of Transport, Ashish Kundra. So that time we are trying to discuss this Delhi policy, solar policy and linkages with the EV policy, but unfortunately, I think it didn't happen. But ultimately said, EV is EV when it's charged from renewables or the green power. So that is the moral of the story, and the ecosystem has to be developed.
Good point, Alekhya. I really appreciate that you made that point. And it was very heartening to have this conversation. In fact, I wanted to continue, but I would like to open this floor to have a couple of questions from audience. If there are, please raise your hands and introduce yourself, whom the question is directed to, before we conclude. Yeah, please. So please introduce yourself and also let us know who this question is directed.
Good morning. So I am Upendra, and I work for organization Sustain Energy Solutions. We are working in the area of energy efficiency and sustainability. So my question is with Mr. Agrawal from BSES. The pace at which we are adding the electrical vehicles to the cities, especially if you talk about Delhi. So have you done any study? What will be the impact in coming 1 or 2 years on the grid demand, and how we are going to handle that?
Thank you, sir, for asking a very valid question. Sir, we did all the 5 years projections down the line, how we have to plan our network, incorporating all DERs, distributed energy resources coming in our area, which is solar, EV and other C&I loads. For EV, what we did is, sir, we did planning and forecasting, or forecasting of load based on 4 different methodologies. One, we adopted a CEA, Central Electricity Authority EPS survey. They have provided certain kind of guidelines, adoption criteria, efficiency criteria, based on which we did 5 years planning. Second, we do take the clue of policy guidelines, policy directions from Delhi government and central governments. We did that. We did that, we thought that by 2030, anyhow, public transport will be migrated to EV. if not entire private, but public will be migrated to EV, then we again pen and paper and pen down the projections. This is how we, and then another is EV at the rate 30% EV adoption at the rate 2030. This is how we did planning and forecasting at a very detailed level. And we come to the point that we found out that out of the total load which we have to serve by 2030, EV will constitute around 5% of that load. If I talk about present numbers, presently we are serving 150 megawatt of load. 50% of being goes for charging of electricity buses. Delhi being leading in this deployment of electric bus program. We have at present 3,800 number of buses being deployed, already deployed. Many more to come. We target 7,000 by next year end. Of course, Delhi government is planning to do it before next year. So this is how we manage our network. We do all the planning. In terms of electricity consumption, if I talk about, Delhi being 16% adoption, having 16% adoption, 38 number of, when we say 16% adoption, that means 100 new vehicles got registered. Out of 100, 16% are electric vehicles. So at a 16% adoption level, when national average is 7%, and 3,800 number of electricity buses being deployed, we have a total consumption of 120 to 150 MUs. And what total MUs we are serving annually is 15,000. So it is even less than 1%. So we in fact are very happy that this sunrise sector will provide us an opportunity of load growth, provide us an opportunity to serve our customer well. There is only one issue during a certain time of the year, during summer season, when EV charging load coincides with our existing peak. For that, we also did some kind of technology interventions for going for smart charging, suggesting demand response, tying up with the large load, bulk loads like electricity bus depots, also doing technology demonstrations like vehicle to grid. So all these initiatives, sir, we are taking care of it, and we are very hopeful, we are very optimistic that we will continue to serve our consumers in a very delightful way, sir. Thank you.
Sumedh, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So, two linked questions. So when we were speaking about...
Introduce yourself.
Yes, sorry.
and
Supriya,
also-
I'm Supriya. I take care of communications at AEEE. So my question is, when we spoke about RWAs, and there is that provision that RWAs and the DISCOMs share the cost for the setup. Now, is there awareness? Because the first step itself is a challenge for the RWAs. So that is my one question. Is there awareness? Now, Sumedh, you also raised about, that people are, on a rental apartment like me, Now, it's very difficult to convince even the RWAs to provide the setup or the landlords. Are we thinking of some alternative approaches to this? For example, I was thinking aloud, is there a possibility of maybe, Akshay, you can answer, like a bubble model we can create. So if I'm moving places, or where there are no set RWAs, can we think of alternative approaches where people can come together and work on creating a setup for themselves?
Yes, you can do that. And at the same time, even the industry understands this. So the industry itself is going. So one is obviously the distribution companies that are coming to your residential society to install charging stations. But apart from that, there are vehicle OEMs as well that are coming into your housing society because they want to sell more vehicles to you. And what they're doing is they're branding that entire space because they're getting, so there are, as Pradeep ji said, there are three things that you need: land, power, and capex. Okay, of the charging station. Land is available with you because you live in that society. Power is also available with you, you have a connection. Now, capex is what you need. And a lot of vehicle OEMs understand that this is the first prong, which will ensure that you move towards them. So if a Hero MotoCorp comes and puts up a charging station in your society, you will feel that they may have put it elsewhere as well. So, you kind of move in that direction and you start thinking to buy a Hero MotoCorp vehicle as compared to anyone else. So that is another approach that is happening, and you can actually go to any of the vehicle, when you're thinking to buy a vehicle, they themselves nowadays will ask you whether your housing society has it, and we can, like players like us, on the background ensure that that is enabled. So we do this for Hero, we do this for Ather, we do this for TVS, and a lot more bunch of guys. So if you see such charging stations in your society, then it is also backed by players like us.
Okay, so I think I will just conclude here. I know there is a hand raise, but can we take it offline if it's fine? Okay, please go ahead, yeah. Please be very brief.
Myself, Varsha Atle. I'm Executive Engineer, Mumbai Municipal Corporation. It is just a follow-up question what she asked. Is there any chances of collaborating this EV manufacturers with government? Because what you discussed was about the residential complexes. But if government wants to come in to set up an infrastructure, are there any case studies or anywhere? Anyone can answer this question.
Anyone would like to take
Thank you.
No worries. Let me see if I got your question right. You're talking about how government can interact with the charging infrastructure manufacturers to set up shops. There is already a scheme in place called PM E-Drive. If you see, there are multiple components in that, and those components include, for example, setting up charging infrastructure at government locations, at deemed locations, for example, metro stations, railway stations, airports, etc. And then there is also a category where private land can be acquired and deploy charging infrastructure on that. So there is already a scheme in place, a certain amount of 2,000 crores of allocation has already been in place. And we have seen that multiple states have putting efforts in submitting proposals in order to get monies for that. And then subsequently tenders will be out from the government side in order to deploy charging infrastructure. So the idea will be that the facilitation of land will be provided by the government itself. The CPOs will come and deploy charging infrastructure. There is certain kind of support from the scheme in terms of upstream infrastructure as well as the charging infrastructure that can be deployed and that can be used by the CPOs. And finally, it will lead to the deployment and management will be CPOs prerogative.
No, thank you. Actually, that was helpful. And frankly speaking, I was taking some copious notes based on what you said. So let me quickly summarize. First of all, EV is coming. You hate it, love it, but you cannot ignore it. So that is for sure. Three things basically turned out. One is that from this panel is one that ecosystem is building, but it is an organic growth that is going to happen, not a steroidal growth. Second is policy driven by evidences will drive the growth. That's what our think tanks and policy supporters are suggesting. And skilling is very important. So that is one area where definitely investments also should flow. Thank you once again. Really appreciated you taking out time to spend with us, sharing those hardcore insights of those trenches which people normally don't do. Thank you once again for being part of this panel. Thank you. A huge round of applause for all of them.
Well, thank you to our speakers for the critical insights and the perspective on residential charging. May I now request the panelists to step forward for a group photograph. Well, thank you everyone. We'll now